Feel the weight of your body, a gentle pressure against the surface that holds you. Notice the subtle, rhythmic pull of your own breathing, an anchor in the ceaseless current of this moment. Air enters, a cool whisper in the nostrils, and it leaves, a warm tide receding into the world. This is the bedrock of your experience, this simple physical fact of being here. Yet, where are you truly? You are not merely the breath, nor the heaviness of your limbs. A constant narrator speaks within the quiet chamber of your mind, a voice that claims ownership of these sensations, a voice that calls itself I. It weaves stories of past and future, it judges, it worries, it plans. This voice feels like the very center of your being, the captain on the bridge of the ship. But what if this captain is an imposter? What if the true you is not the storyteller, but the silent, spacious awareness in which the story is being told? Consider the possibility that the identity you have so carefully guarded, the personality you present to the world like a well-rehearsed play, is not your essence. It is a costume, a magnificent and intricate garment you began sewing in the first moments of your life, a piece of survival technology, so effective that you eventually forgot you were even wearing it. The invitation now is not to tear it off in a violent act of rebellion, but simply to become aware of the fabric. Feel its texture against your skin, notice where it binds you, and gently, with profound curiosity, begin to ask who you might be without it. This quiet inquiry is the first step out of a dream you didn't know you were having, the gentle turn of a key in a lock you never realized was there. That first garment was woven from necessity. Picture a small child, an explosion of pure, unfiltered impulse. He runs through the house, a whirlwind of joyous noise, only to be met with a sharp, "Be quiet, you're making a mess." The current of his being hits a dam. He learns, in that instant, a fundamental lesson of human socialization. Some parts of me are acceptable, and some are not. Approval, the sunlight all young creatures turn toward, is conditional. So begins the great sorting. The boisterous energy is tucked away, labeled bad. The quiet, compliant aspect is brought forward, polished, and presented. This is not a malicious act. It is the genesis of the persona, an intelligent adaptation to a complex world. The psyche, in its profound wisdom, builds a negotiator, an ambassador to the tribe. This ambassador learns the local customs, speaks the right language, and ensures the organism's survival. Another child, a girl with a fierce sense of justice, sees an unfairness on the playground and erupts in righteous anger. She is called bossy, too much. She learns to swallow the fire, to smooth over her sharp edges, to become agreeable. The fire doesn't vanish, it is merely relegated to the cellar of her soul, where it smolders, unattended. Over years, this process of selection and rejection becomes an unconscious art form. We build a self-image from the praise of parents, the expectations of teachers, the reflection we see in the eyes of our peers. We become the smart one, the funny one, the responsible one, the rebellious one. Each label is a thread in the costume, each role a patch on the armor. This construct, this ego structure, is not an enemy. It is a brilliant, necessary tool. It helps you navigate traffic, file your taxes, and maintain relationships. It creates a stable point of reference in a universe of bewildering flux. It gives you a story, a name, a history. The problem arises not from the existence of this mask, but from the forgetting that it is a mask. We mistake the ambassador for the entire nation. We believe the character we play on the stage of life is the totality of who we are. The intricate fortress we built to protect our vulnerable core becomes the very prison that prevents us from experiencing our own boundless nature. We polish its outer walls, decorate its ramparts, and proudly display its flag, all while the true king or queen languishes in a forgotten dungeon within. The world applauds the fortress. It is strong, predictable, and safe. We receive accolades for its impenetrable defenses, for the consistency of its facade. We achieve success, we gather possessions, we build a life that looks correct from the outside, a life that perfectly matches the blueprint of the persona. And yet a strange, persistent sense of unease begins to creep in, a subtle but pervasive feeling that something is fundamentally missing. It is the faint, almost inaudible rattling of the chains from the dungeon below, a call from the exiled parts of ourselves, a whisper that reminds us of the vast kingdom we have abandoned for the sake of a very small, very secure, and very lonely castle. The life lived in service to this curated identity is a performance for an audience that is perpetually unimpressed, because the primary audience is oneself, and the soul knows a counterfeit when it sees one. The more we perfect the external representation, the more we starve the internal reality. The cost of this performance is a slow, creeping spiritual exhaustion, a draining of the vital life force required to hold the mask in place. It is a life spent holding your breath, waiting for an exhale that never comes. The initial signs of the structure's decay are subtle, often manifesting in the body. A tightness in the jaw that never quite releases. A shallow breath that seems incapable of reaching the depths of the lungs. A persistent, low-grade anxiety that hums just beneath the surface of daily activities. A background static that no amount of distraction can fully silence. It is the psychic equivalent of running a powerful software program on an outdated machine. The system begins to lag, to overheat, to show signs of strain. You might find yourself in the midst of a life you painstakingly constructed, surrounded by all the markers of success, yet feeling a profound and terrifying hollowness. Imagine a woman, an architect renowned for her clean, minimalist designs. She stands in a kitchen she created, a marvel of steel and glass, celebrated in magazines. Her family moves around her, their voices echoing in the perfect, sterile space. In this moment of apparent triumph, a wave of alienation washes over her. She feels like a ghost in her own home, a spectator to her own life. The love for her family is real, but it feels filtered through a thick pane of glass, an emotional barrier she cannot name. This is the exhaustion of the persona. The character of the successful, composed architect has consumed so much of her energy that little remains for the raw, messy, unpredictable business of being human. The mask, once a useful tool, has fused to her face, and its rigid smile prevents any other expression from emerging. The suffering is not acute. It is a chronic, soul-level ache. It is the pain of self-abandonment. To quell this discomfort, we often double down on the strategies of the ego. We seek more success, more validation, more possessions, more experiences. We believe that if we just add one more perfect room to the fortress, we will finally feel at home. But each new acquisition, each new achievement, only reinforces the structure and deepens the inner famine. The shiny new distraction offers a momentary reprieve, but the underlying emptiness returns, often stronger than before. This is the dark night of the ego, a period where the world no longer provides the satisfaction it once promised. The old answers cease to work. The usual comforts feel like ashes in the mouth. It is during this phase of disillusionment that a genuine question can finally arise, not from the intellect, but from the very core of one's being. The question is not, how can I fix this feeling, or how can I be happier? The question is deeper, more terrifying, and more liberating. Who am I really? This question is the first crack in the foundation of the fortress. It is the soul's desperate rebellion against the tyranny of the false self. It signals a readiness, often born of immense pain, to stop reinforcing the walls and to finally turn and face whatever lies in the forgotten chambers within. The world will advise you to repair the cracks, to redouble your efforts, to think positive. It will offer you 1,000 ways to patch up the persona, to make it more effective, more lovable, more successful. But the path to true awakening lies in the opposite direction. It lies not in renovation, but in demolition. It requires the courage to walk away from the beautifully decorated prison you have called home, and to venture into the wild, unmapped territory of your own inner world. The discomfort you feel is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are beginning to wake up. It is a sacred summons, a homing signal from your authentic self, calling you back from the long exile of conformity. The journey it proposes is not one of addition, but of subtraction, not of becoming more, but of unbecoming everything you thought you were, in order to discover the luminous, indestructible truth of what you have always been. This existential crisis is not the end of your life. It is the potential end of your illusion. The descent begins when the floor of the known world gives way. It is rarely a gentle chosen path. More often, it is a fall, a collapse triggered by a life event that the persona cannot manage. A devastating betrayal, a sudden illness, the loss of a career that defined you. The mask, designed for predictable social exchanges, shatters against the raw, jagged edge of reality. And in the ensuing silence, when the voice of the narrator is stunned into momentary quiet, you hear new sounds rising from the cellar. This is the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is simply all the parts of yourself that you deemed unacceptable and repressed into the unconscious. It is the repository of your disowned humanity. The good person, who has spent a lifetime being accommodating and kind, is suddenly confronted with a volcanic rage, a capacity for hatred so intense it is terrifying. The pious individual discovers a well of untamed lust and forbidden desires. The strong and independent, one is plunged into the abyss of their own terrifying vulnerability and neediness. A man who built his identity on being a calm, rational intellectual finds himself, in the wake of a professional humiliation, consumed by a venomous, petty envy towards a colleague. He watches his own mind concoct elaborate, spiteful fantasies. For the first time, he doesn't push the thoughts away or condemn himself for them. He simply observes, with a kind of horrified awe, this primal beast that lives within him. He sees that his intellectualism wasn't a mark of superiority, but a sophisticated defense mechanism built to keep this very beast locked in the basement. This is the critical juncture. The ego's strategy is to deny, to project, to disown. It will say, "That is not me." It will find someone else in the world to carry the projection of that rage, that envy, that greed. We see this writ large in our endless culture wars, where each side projects its collective shadow onto the other, creating a world of blameless heroes and irredeemable villains. The path of integration, however, demands radical ownership. It requires the courage to say, "Yes, this too is me. I have within me the capacity for all of it." It is the recognition that the same archetypal energies that fueled the horrors of history exist, as potential, within every human heart. This is not an exercise in self-flagellation. It is an act of profound wholeness. By acknowledging your own capacity for darkness, you cease to be naively terrified of it in others. You develop a tragic, compassionate understanding of the human condition. You realize that true goodness is not the absence of malevolent impulse, but the conscious choice to act with integrity despite its presence. A person who has never confronted their own inner dragon is not peaceful. They are merely harmless, and often unconsciously dangerous through their own naivete. The one who has faced the dragon, who has looked it in the eye and acknowledged its power without succumbing to it, is the one who can wield true, conscious compassion. The great paradox is that the gold is always hidden in the darkest places. The rage, once acknowledged and integrated, becomes the fuel for setting powerful, non-negotiable boundaries. The disowned vulnerability, once embraced, becomes the gateway to profound intimacy and connection. The suppressed ambition, once owned, becomes a force for creative contribution to the world. The shadow, when brought into the light of awareness, is not a monster to be slain but a source of immense power, vitality, and authenticity. It is the rich, fertile soil from which the flower of the integrated self can finally bloom. This encounter is a crucible. It will burn away your self-righteousness, your simplistic moral categories, your carefully constructed image of being one of the good guys. It will leave you humbled, raw, and more fully human. It is the terrifying, necessary initiation into a deeper, more honest way of being. You must go into the dark to find the light. You must be willing to lose the self you thought you were to discover the self you truly are. Out of the crucible of that confrontation, a new space begins to open. The frantic energy of the ego, which spent its entire existence managing, defending, and promoting the persona, starts to subside. Having faced the worst within oneself and survived, there is little left to fear. The constant, low-level anxiety that was the fuel for the ego's machinations begins to dissipate, leaving behind a profound quiet. This is not an empty, dead silence. It is a silence that is alive, pregnant with potential. It is the vast, open sky of awareness, in which the clouds of thought, emotion, and sensation are now seen to be passing phenomena. Before, you were the cloud, identifying with every fleeting mood and thought storm. Now, you are the sky, the changeless context in which all experience unfolds. This is the process of dissolution. It is not an annihilation, but an expansion. The sense of being a small, separate me, a fragile identity trapped within a body, begins to dissolve like a salt doll walking into the sea. The boundaries of the self become porous, permeable. The feeling is one of release, of letting go of a burden you didn't even realize you were carrying. The immense, lifelong effort of being someone simply ceases. In its place is the simple, effortless reality of being. Thoughts will still arise, but they are no longer believed unconditionally. They are seen for what they are, habitual, conditioned patterns of energy, ripples on the surface of consciousness. Emotions will still flow, anger, joy, grief. But they are no longer resisted or clung to. They are allowed to move through the body like weather, honored for their information and energy, but they no longer define the core of your being. You are the space for the emotion, not the emotion itself. This is true freedom. Not the freedom to get what the ego wants, but the freedom from the tyranny of the ego's wanting. Integration is the process of learning to live from this open, expanded space. It is not about retreating from the world into a state of detached bliss. It is about re-engaging with the world from a place of wholeness. The man who confronted his inner rage no longer needs to perform a persona of detached calm. He can now access that fiery energy consciously, using it to speak truth with clarity and to protect what he loves with fierce compassion. The woman who owned her deep vulnerability no longer needs to hide behind a mask of invulnerable competence. She can now relate to others from a place of authentic openness, creating connections of a depth she had never before imagined. You act in the world, you love, you create, you build, but you do so without the desperate, needy attachment of the ego. The outcome of your actions is no longer tied to your sense of self-worth. You find a deep joy in the process itself, in the simple act of contributing your unique gifts to the world, without requiring a specific result for validation. Your life is no longer a script to be followed, but a dance to be danced. There is a return to the simplicity of the beginning, to the felt presence of the body, the rhythm of the breath. But it is not the same. It is a simplicity on the other side of complexity. The awareness of the breath is no longer a mere technique for calming the mind, but a direct experience of the life force itself, a connection to the pulsating, intelligent energy of the universe. The journey from the sleeping self to the awakened self is a spiral, not a straight line. It ends where it began, in the profound, ordinary miracle of the present moment, but with a consciousness that has traveled through the depths of hell and has returned with the treasures of its own forgotten kingdom. The fortress has crumbled, the prisoner has been set free, and the king and queen now reign together, not over a small, fortified castle, but over the boundless, luminous expanse of reality itself.